There we go. Well, welcome to Lessons in Leadership with my buddies H and Micah. We've been together over a year now. We started in Clubhouse and we've been on LinkedIn Live now for a while, every other week. And we have been talking about the importance of your leadership brand. And I'm really excited about how we've been really soaking it in and not rushing through it. And we've had some great questions from you guys. Chat, and we will respond to you during this message. If you don't know who I am, I'm Dana Williams, and I help leaders who are disconnected find their purpose through their strengths and live it out every day and give them a blueprint to do that. And I'm really excited about talking about your leadership brand today. I'll kick it off to Micah and he can introduce himself and then H.
All right. My name is Micah Lawrence. I'm an ICF certified strengths coach. Sorry, an ICF certified coach and a Gallup certified strengths coach. I blend those together sometimes. And I work a lot with startup founders and their teams and do leadership training and coaching with the leaders and team development training with their teams. And I was actually telling Dana and H before we started that this is one of those topics, building a leadership brand, that I'm eager to learn about myself. I don't do a lot of formal exercises with the leaders that I work with specifically on brand. So I'm hoping to take some things out of this as well. I also mentioned, I don't know if anybody is joining because of a post that I put on LinkedIn recently, but in my post, I encouraged people who feel like they've built a good leadership brand to leave comments, like Dana said in the comment section. We can't respond by typing, but we'll respond vocally to your thoughts and insights, even if you feel like you've really figured it out. We'd like to hear those things too. I'm eager to learn from both H and Dana and from anybody who's joining that's figured this out. So I'll pass it off to H to introduce himself and our topic for today.
Thanks, Micah. I'm H. Muir. My business is called Lift Shop. I work with brands, teams, and organizations to give them a lift. Lift stands for Leadership Ideas Facilitation Training. So brand leadership, brand ideas, brand facilitation, brand training. So, and I've been doing leadership brand. Well, I lived in Wisconsin for a long time.
Yeah.
So
we won't let that. We won't.
That is not a good example of your leadership pitch, which is what we're
right.
going to talk about. Yada yada should not be part of your
do not do.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope.
Yes, we'll see if it pops up.
We'll see if it works.
That's kind of an interesting point, though. It would be just as helpful. Like when I did strategy and planning for years at a Fortune 100 company, we would often talk about that strategy is as much what you don't do as what you do. And that might be an interesting take on brand too, is that H just gave us a great example of what you don't do in your elevator pitch, and stuff like that is actually really helpful.
I mean, when I do strategy, one of the things I do, and I use a flip chart and I just go, what's in and out of scope, right? And we visually put on a post that here's what you do and here's what you don't do. Mm-hmm. And I think for a leadership brand, one of the things that I would do, I don't know if we'll get into it today, is to say, what are all the touch points for you as a leader? And by that, we mean, how do people in your organization and the people you lead and or the work you lead, how do others experience that? And what are all those touch points? And what is your goal in each of those touch points? How do you ensure that your brand comes across consistently over time in each of those touch points? I think that's a really interesting, I don't know, we'll get there today because we'll talk more about what is your content. Maybe that's the next time, is how do you live your brand and what are those touch points that bring your brand to life?
I think that's a good point, because it seems like every time we go deep, we go deeper, right? We have one more. Oh, let's add that. So definitely the content is king. And I think when you're thinking about your leadership brand, you really need to think about the content you're developing. And just like you said, what are all the platforms you got it on? So
by the way, I can only see my screen. I can't see you all. So
okay.
Oh yeah, you're good. We can see
you. We can see you,
and we can see the screen.
Great. I don't know why I can't see. That's interesting. So just to bring you up to speed where we are, this is our third or fourth. This is our third. It kind of, when I
Third.
do a formal leadership brand session, I talk about building the 4 Ps of your leadership brand, which is a play on the 4 Ps of marketing, which would be product, promotion, price, and placement. Ooh, I got them.
Good job.
And
Woohoo!
yeah, and so we talk about, and what we've talked about so far, we talk about your power source, right? And your power source should come from your strengths. It should also come from your personality, right? So if Mike and I, who look like two guys from same mother or father, but we
You
could
just
have
need to
the
get a
same.
beard.
Yeah, well, he
Yeah,
would be
that's right.
much younger
I didn't have a
brother.
beard last time.
Yeah, wait, what is that? That's what does that say about your leadership brand now that you have a beard?
Yeah.
Ooh.
But if we had the same strengths, right, the exact same strengths, people could still experience differently based on our personality, right? That Micah may be extroverted and I'm introverted. So your power isn't just your strengths; it's also your personality, and it's your values, right? So we could have Mike and I could have the same strengths and the same personality, but what we care about, what we value, and what we believe in is different.
Right.
So we do an exercise. We talked about that, about really getting to your power, and ultimately the output of the power is understanding what is the benefit you offer as a leader. And we do a benefit sort about what are you good at? You're at parity with other leaders. What are you better at? What are the 1 or 2 benefits that you offer as a result of your power? And what are you best at? What's that one thing you want to be known for? And that anchors the leadership brand that you understand your power source as a leader. Then we talk about purpose, and it's really your purpose is why do you answers the question why do you lead, and kind of what do you want to be known for. And that's where, and we did a whole thing on values as well, which is part of your power. So that brings us kind of up to where we are. Um, that's as good as my
And
PowerPoint
I think too,
visualization is.
putting a bow on that,
Mhm.
I love that we actually stopped. And last week talked about, or last time we got together was talked about values. And I think one of our listeners was saying, I hadn't really thought about my core values and my Clifton strengths and how those connect and how
Huh.
that's a part of my leadership purpose. And so it's those kind of moments that we're looking for as we talk today, as we get into the further part of this leadership brand workshop, is how you view yourself and how others view you. And I think it goes to, as we get into pitch, all the things we've been building up to for today. So knowing your, as you said, knowing your power source, knowing your Clifton strengths. And for those that don't know what Clifton strengths are, you can go to gallup.com and research that. But it is something that we're all pretty using in our coaching. And I think it's always good to mention that because some people might not be Clifton strengths followers. So
Yeah, and it's good to
Yep.
remember
thanks.
that these things don't happen in a vacuum. They
Yeah.
combine together and create a dynamic that's unique to each leader as all of these traits come together.
And I think that's I think when I do this session, I tell folks, it's like, look, understanding what the benefit is that you offer based on your strengths and your personality and your values, that takes some real work, and it's iterative, and to synthesize that right down to a few things.
Yeah.
But that's what what a personal brand is. It's a strategy. It gives you
Mhm.
direction about who you are and how you come across as a leader. And I think that when you have a strategy, you have to make choices. You cannot be all things to all people, which is one of the learnings from Gallup over the years. Is well-rounded doesn't make you successful. That's true in
Mhm.
as a leader, right? Being
Yeah.
well-rounded doesn't make you successful. That's why you have surround yourself with people so you have a well-rounded leadership team. But I think that just to back up to what the purpose of a leadership brand is, it's to give you direction and guidance in your path as a leader. So I'll put I got to say, sometimes quotes find you. Um, I
And
I
acronyms.
I got this quote yesterday and I just kind of saved it, and so here's my kind of where we are so far. And this is from Shakespeare. The meaning of life
Oh.
is to the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away.
That's
Mm.
And I
cool.
feel like the power is your gift. What you could say, instead of doing a benefit sort, it's like, what's your gift as a leader?
I
And the
love that.
purpose is, how do you give it away? Yeah, I saw that and was like, whoa.
That is really
totally,
cool. I like
I'm
that.
incorporating that in the leadership
It's
brand.
almost like he has a way
Yeah.
with words, that guy.
You think?
Yeah,
You
yeah, right.
think?
I don't know who this Shakespeare guy is, but that's pretty
I
good.
don't know, but he's good at writing stuff.
Yeah, he is.
That's funny.
Oh, who knew he knew all about leadership brand? He was ahead of his
Yeah,
time.
right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So at this
Yeah.
point, when I do the leadership brand, there's a couple iterations, but we can go into like your leadership brand positioning, which is really about understanding who your target audience is, what do they need, and how do you position your purpose and your benefit, right? But ultimately, what I find is it still has to get down into that. What's your point of view as a leader, and what's your pitch? What's that elevator pitch that really articulates your brand? And so this is, if you in the model that we're using, you can see that the point of view is the function, and then the questions we're going to answer and talk about today is, what do you want your audience in quote, to know about you as a leader? And audiences is typically it's the people you lead, but it's also peers, and or it's essentially any key stakeholder. It may be, if
Yeah,
you're in an
stakeholders.
organization, could be your boss or a lead, another set of leaders that you report to. What do you want them to know about you as a leader? That's really the questions we want to answer today. And this is just kind of how we define pitch.
Well,
And
and
I can't.
something you said a couple of minutes ago, H, made me think about the fact that I've known leaders and worked with leaders who feel like they do need to be well-rounded, and they want to be perceived as having all of the answers or being able to do everything. If I have people reporting to me who represent multiple functions, I need to be perceived as an expert in all functions. And when they feel like they need to be all things to all people, they actually become a more generic, homogenous looking leader, and it's not as effective. They're being something that they're not, or they're trying to be something that they're not. And I think that there's something really powerful in a leader who has the confidence and humility. I'll put these both in the same boat, to be able to say, this is what you can expect from me. I know myself well enough that I know I'm just going to crush it in these areas, and you can expect me to show up in these ways for you. But I'm also not this person. Maybe I lack expertise in your function, or I lack strengths in these areas, and I'm going to need your help in those ways. And the kind of confidence that shows when you have the humility to say, I know myself well, and this is how you can expect me to show up. That's a powerful brand, because then they can speak for you too. They know what they can expect from you. I've worked for leaders where I didn't know who they were, or what they were good at, or what they weren't good at, because they kept it hidden. And I've seen that in enough leaders I've seen in enough leaders who aren't that way, who know themselves and communicate that to their people, that those are the leaders that I want to work for.
Yeah, I would also build on that and say, especially given the pandemic and the Great Resignation, which is now being respun into the Great Regret as people are boomeranging back to their previous job.
Yeah.
There is greater demand and greater focus on leaders being coaches and focus on people, and not being masters of the task, subject matter experts, right? And I think one of the great things I heard, that I think applies to leadership: when you don't know what to do, you do what you know, because that you feel confident in that. And I think that's the point of being, as a leader, understanding, to your point, Micah, your vulnerabilities, and saying, I don't know how to do this, and I need help doing it. And I see that that's a big gap I'm hearing from clients of, hey, help us teach our leaders to engage and coach and retain our people.
Yeah.
And for the very reason you just mentioned, because we're now in hybrid and they're not always going to be with them in person. So how they come across on a Zoom, or how they come across when their team is not all together, I think that's huge. And
Yep.
so finding those avenues, as we talked about in our previous series, which was about, how to lead through the Great Resignation. So
Well, and I
I
think
appreciate you bringing that up.
part of this aspect too, the pitch part, I would almost divide. I'm going to oversimplify this, but the last couple of things that we've talked about in previous weeks have been about knowing your brand and self-awareness to be able to identify first. So identifying and defining your brand comes first. Then it's about communicating and living your brand. And like that distinction, I think we're getting into the pitch part is now that I know it, which I think is a hard step for some leaders, that they don't go through that process of even identifying and defining it. But once I do, now how do I communicate and live that so that people see it in me? And it reminded me actually with my teams, when I was in the corporate setting, I would give new members of my team a one-page view of my top 11 strengths. I always included my 11 because it was individualization. I felt like that was useful for people to know. And I know that's H's number one, right? Is that your first?
It's one or two. I can't remember.
One or two. It's up there. Anyway, I wanted to include that. So right down the middle were my top 11 strengths. And on one side was what you can expect of me in positive ways, how you can expect my strengths to show up in the way that I lead and the way that I work. And on the other side, and this was hard for me, was these are my blind spots and this is where I need help from you. And it was things like, look, my activator, self-assurance and positivity is going to make me want to jump right into things without thinking about what could go wrong. And you're going to hear me say things like, it'll all work out. And that's when I need you to challenge me. And that was a hard exercise to be able to, for one, define this is what you can expect of me, but then to extend that to other people and say, this is what I want you to know about me, including my vulnerabilities, my blind spots, because we'll be better together if you complement me with your strengths too. And that was a game changer. That made my relationships better with my team.
Yeah.
I love that, Micah. And I think you role model vulnerability. So they'll do that. So they would do that. So what were you going to say, H?
So just, Micah, your point earlier about simplifying it though. So if you think about the 4 Ps, right, what we've worked on with power and purpose is the messenger or leadership. Now we're working on the message or the brand.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
And so these are 4 questions that kind of build on what your one pager, Micah. And this is what I've used certainly when I do new leader assimilations, right? When you're a leader on a new team, these are the things they want to know from you. I mean, I've done enough new leader assimilations where I was just coaching with someone doing this and they go, and I said, well, if you ask your team, I can tell you, because I've asked enough teams, here's what they want to know. And I think, the first one is if you've done the power and the purpose, you've got the first 2. This third and fourth one, and I always tell new leaders, it's like, don't do your new leader assimilation the first week or 2. Give yourself time so you understand the situation you're in. What are the needs of the business? Why were you hired? What are the needs of the team? What have you seen? Because that helps frame your expectations and what you expect from others. Were you brought in to do a turnaround? Were you brought in to take what's good and make it great? What were you brought in to do? So I think that really reflects that. So we're going to walk through these and we'll spend as much time as people
and
want.
H, do you want to make sure, because we just see the slide up right now, it says Leadership Brand Workshop. So make sure.
I've been going through, I'm on like my 6th slide.
That happens every time.
I know. So I don't know why that's not showing.
Oh my gosh.
There we go. Now you're moving.
We can see it.
Oh, that's wrong. Now I'm not in slide mode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It didn't change for us. It just went to a new slide. The 4 Ps.
Yeah,
now can you see the pitch
4 Ps
slide?
of leadership? Yeah. The 4 Ps of leadership.
Wait, no, I'm not on that slide.
Oh.
Okay. Hold on.
So I think you have to click. You may have to click it with your mouse rather than using like your down arrow.
That's what I've been doing. I've been using my mouse.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
So what are you seeing now?
We're seeing where it says defined, your POV pitch defined.
And the 4 questions?
Answers.
Okay.
Answers the question.
So if I go here, can you see the next slide?
Yahoo. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm not in presentation mode and you can see it. When I go to presentation mode, you can't see it.
That's funny. What's funny is it was showing us this view even when you were in presentation mode. We didn't see any change.
Really? So now I'm in presentation mode. But you're still
not moving.
Yeah,
no, I didn't. Okay. No, I haven't moved it. I'm just like presentation mode. All right. We'll leave it here.
Okay.
Good troubleshooting.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this question people struggle with, right? Like, who are you? And I tell especially new leaders, people want to know your background, where you come from, what you care about. How do you do, who's your family, where you've been, where you've worked. And I like to answer that, what I've learned. And I think that's as much about what you've learned, not about business. It's, Micah, to your earlier comment, what you've learned about yourself and what
Yeah.
your strengths
Mhm.
are. And I go back to your power, right? And say, you got to balance it to say, here's what I'm good at. Here's what I really, care about, my beliefs, my values. And here's what I'm not good at. And frankly, I don't have a lot of, and I use, to me, the neutral language I like to use is, here's what gives me energy. Here's what's energy draining, because it's more neutral. And I find that works for me. I don't know. What are your all's thoughts when you talk about, you meet someone new for the first time and talking about who you are, what you bring for us, what we bring to a project or a coaching gig. What's your all's experience in terms of answering this question?
So I think, and we touched on this a little bit, but when we're in our strengths, we're energized. And so it's
Mhm.
really about managing your strengths so that you're in them every day. And I think that's one of the things I talk about is I get excited. So for example, H, you and I have ideation. I don't think Micah has ideation. I can't remember. I don't think
No,
so.
I
But
don't.
yeah, okay. So if we were going to be doing a brainstorm session, that would give me a lot of energy. And even as we talk through ideas for the next sessions, that gives me energy. But it also is my blind spot, right? So in meetings, I have to be careful that I'm not throwing out ideas all the time because that gives me, I have to manage that energy. So it's a lot about what we were on that path of saying, here's where I'm really, my energy source is, but here's how I've got to watch it. Does
Yeah.
that make
Well,
sense?
and
I
to
like
build
that.
on that with ideator, you and I can get together and ideate and we go, oh my God, that was such a great meeting. And we go away and we both go away with two completely different ideas and direction, right? Because nobody
Next steps.
Yeah.
converged. Yeah.
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 That's
And
happened with me and clients.
I think it goes back to clarity that we were talking about, clarity about who you are and understanding that. And then as a leader, being clear, right? So
Well, and
clear about direction.
I love that. I like the phrase, and I listen for this when there are opportunities to use this with leaders. It's not just what I've learned; it's what I've learned about myself. And I love that you
Mhm.
made that distinction, H, because I love
Hmm.
that phrase. Be Part of why I like that is it's subjective. I sometimes leaders come in and they're just like, I'm really good at fixing things. I'm a really good communicator. It's like a job interview where it's almost just boasting. And that can actually turn people off. That can be a negative experience
Yeah.
when people feel like you're just coming in and telling everybody how great you are. But when you use phrases like, what I've learned about myself is, it is saying, this is my perception. I'm not saying you need to agree with this. So you haven't seen this yet. But what I've learned
Hmm.
about myself is that this is how I show up. And that's a really effective way of letting people in and see from your perspective. They still need to observe that themselves and see evidence of it over time. But
Mhm.
being able to communicate that is such an effective way to let people see where you're coming from and what they can expect from you.
Well, and it's also the first part of it's self-awareness, which is the first part of emotional intelligence, which
Yep.
subconsciously, emotional intelligence is a key driver of being an effective leader. So I don't know if I'm not sure if your audience knows that, but subconsciously, I think they do. To go, oh, this person's self-aware,
Yeah, exactly.
or at least they say they are.
And we
We'll
have a
see.
comment from Joshua, and he just said, as
Right.
someone who has had a couple of career pivots, it's been important for me to connect the dots for people on how those
Mm,
all tie together and build on each other. So I love Joshua that you brought that up because sometimes when we're looking for that energy source we have and who we are, it's a lot of different things. It could be the passion, it could be a project where you just couldn't stop doing it. But when you look at those, they might be two different things, but they do intersect in what you're saying. And being able to find those intersections and find the pattern is real important, I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that.
Having transitioned from trucks and trains to consumer
Consumer
packaged
goods.
goods, people were like, how are you gonna, I got a lot of my clients who are all MBAs from, big time schools. And I said, what I know, I don't know marketing and I don't know CPG. I do know leadership and I do know how to
Hmm.
manage people and I know how to build teams.
Yeah.
And that was my inroad. 10 years later, I'm like, yeah, I know marketing. 'Cause
You got this.
I did, well, yeah, because what's interesting, and we were having this conversation earlier, you prove yourself in one area, they'll give you permission. So I proved myself, and they came to me and said, we need to start a marketing curriculum. And I'm like, give me your subject matter experts, let's partner. And we built it out. And
Nice.
I spent the next, yeah. And then that's how I became a marketing expert.
And I want to ask you a question, H, based on that. How did you come up with this leadership, how to develop your leadership brand? Was that a part of that, or was this something you developed that you started getting that your clients started asking you for?
It was, well, I'll tell you how I came up with it. It's the connection, to Josh's point, of my two worlds, right? So leadership development and marketing, branding. And I was at a large beer company, which is very male dominated. And we had a women's network. And the women's network was, how do we get fair share of voice? How do we get our fair, how do we get seen? And so we were just, they asked me to come in and do strength finders, and I did. And they go, how do we take this to the next level? And most of the women in this group were in marketing. And I said, well, let's talk. And because personal brand was getting traction, right? But I said, let's do your personal brand around that. And that got more traction. And then I do a volunteer thing every year with the University of Wisconsin and their executive extension. And I'd been doing some stuff for them, and I pitched them on it, because it's like a 3-month thing for different leaders from different companies. And I'm like the guest speaker at the end. And I said, let's talk about building your leadership brand. So we do strength finders, and we've done this now 12 years, I think.
Awesome.
And so what you're seeing is kind of like that. Yeah. So it was born out of this, and it's ironic too, right? That these were women who were amazing marketers, and it's like, okay, we still need to get our fair share. And that's kind of why formally building and taking the time to build your brand and being able to articulate it just puts kind of it's packaging, and it's not false packaging. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It just makes it makes you come across better. It's also efficient, right? So that you don't go, oh my God, I've got a new team. What am I getting? Well, I've done the work. I know how to do this.
I think not going through this exercise is false packaging. This is true packaging.
Yeah.
This is insight into the true me as a leader.
Oh, so many times, so many times I've had leaders that, I'm doing new leader assimilation. I'll never forget this guy who was making the transition from like HR, and he'd hit IT, and he'd started as a consultant, and he was now going to be head of market research. And I tried to prepare him, right? I'm like, because I met with his team, and I go, here's what they want to know. He comes in, and I'm not kidding you. I would model this for you. He comes in at the front of the group, right? He takes the chair, he turns it around, and he sits like this. And I'm like, oh, there goes your brand. Because right there, you've put the back of the chair to your audience, and it was such a horrible move. And first impressions matter. Anyway, sorry, Dana.
Well, that goes back to your emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
Yeah, he probably thought he was being smooth and casual. Yeah.
It was just so bad.
When you find who you are, which through your strengths, through understanding your power source, just be you in a way that people will see that and trust you, because they're going to trust you for who you are, not trying to be something you're not. And that's where it comes across. You can just see that when leaders are trying to be something they're not.
Well, and we talked about touch points, right? And that may be a follow-up to this. So so you think about first impressions, right? And this is from Amy Cuddy's book, Presence. First impressions are based on two things. Do I trust you? And do I respect you? Right? It's kind of like when we were in Neanderthal times, you're walking down the path and you see someone, and that's the first thing is, can I trust you, or do I need to run? And trust comes from, do you exude warmth? And so talking about yourself confidently exudes warmth, and talking about and being vulnerable also exudes warmth, because it draws people to you. I think too often as leaders, we go right to credibility, which is what drives respect. And we read off our resume. Yeah, we read our resume. And it's like, that's not what makes a strong first impression.
Yeah, it's one-sided.
Yep. We're at time, folks.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
you said we may have to follow up on this. That's what every time we have
say
to
every
follow
week.
up on
That
this.
should be the new name of our.
How many questions? Yeah, how many questions are in your new leader assimilation? We only got through one.
I have a pool of about 8. So these are the 4, right? If I got and like click on this, that I use
the next 4.
Yeah, but
Oh,
for new leader
that's right.
simulation, there's probably, I just sent this package to a client. There's like 8 questions. And I think, as we just said, we got through one and it was 20 minutes. I'll usually choose, there's like 4 to 6 that you should use in a new leader assimilation. These to me are the top 4.
Yeah.
But there's some other ones as well.
Cool.
So yeah.
Well, we can talk about how we want to come back next time, because we never get through content, which I think is great.
I know. Joshua, thanks for your comments. Those of you that didn't make comments, please stay in touch with us. I think we'll continue the conversation. I heard several different ideas on touch points and content. I think what we need to do is go back and revisit those questions. And I would ask, as we close out, what is the amount of time a leader should think about this? I mean, it's not a quick thing. They need to get these questions, soak in it. So I think as leaders out there, whether they're individual coaches or they're leaders, what kind of time have you seen over the last 12 years as you doing this? What do you think is the most effective way?
I think the answer is it depends on how well you know yourself and if you've had the benefit of having assessments, right? Like I still tweak and I think it's a diminishing return, right? Or if you do, like I would spend at least 4 to 8 hours and it doesn't have to be in a row, but like to build this out and really make some choices about who you are as a leader. And then I think, and do the due diligence where you write it down and then you start sharing it with others, because a brand is only, you've got to get reaction to the brand. You've got to launch it in market, to use the marketing vernacular, and see how your audience and your customers respond to it, and then tweak it as you go. So I think it's, as you become a leader, it is most important. I'll put it this way: it is most important to have that pitch and be aligned with your purpose and power when you're new and the team is new, because that is when they're most eager to hear it, and it makes the biggest difference.
And I would just add that it's not enough to know yourself and keep it to yourself, that you have to communicate to the people that report to you and your peers and stakeholders to see the value out of it. It's not enough to keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been showing mine in sessions for like 15 years, so I've gotten plenty of feedback.
Yeah. And isn't that wonderful, though, that you kind of are open for the feedback and you've got it out there? And you mentioned this, marketers are the hardest ones to be able to market themselves, right? So, and if a marketer is having a hard time marketing themselves, how's a generalist doing that, So, So this is great. I love your content, and I love how you organize it so clearly. Next time we'll work on we'll let you know if we're not flowing.
Obviously, none of us are IT professionals.
Obviously, but that's okay. That's who
I used to be, but I was never very good at it. So,
well, that's great. So we will see you guys in 2 weeks, which I believe is today is the 9th, so the 22nd, which is a Monday at noon, is our next session. So please join us again. Loved having you guys here. Thank you, H, for leading us in this discussion, and Micah for your great participation. So we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks all.
And bye, Josh.
Have a good one.